So, welcome to the Life Given podcast. I'm your host, Isaac Lopez. Today, I'm joined by Jonathan Erber. And if you don't know who he is, he attended the University of Idaho. He's a father and a husband. He lives here in Moscow. He taught Logos School for a stint.
Yep.
He also was my music teacher for about a semester or a quarter or something like that at New Sanders College. And I'm sorry for that, Jonathan. And he now runs and is one of the best mechanics at Erber Auto and is well known in our town. And so, if you haven't taken your car to his shop, what are you doing? And I'll link to their website in the description. So if you guys have somehow have not heard of Erber Auto, go check them out.
We gotta be careful with the associations with QAnon here. It's like we just three organizations just got attached to QAnon.
Yeah, so we can cut and trim, and we just won't mention it's QAnon. No, so actually that's what we're going to talk about today is the conspiracy QAnon, the conspiracy theory, and MSM, mainstream media, has done their darndest to debunk it. For myself, I'm not a firm believer in it, but I've done some digging. And it's an interesting conspiracy theory. So honestly, I wouldn't mind if we talked about conspiracy theories and how should Christians interact with them as a whole. But then specifically QAnon, what's believable about it, what's not, and actually have a real conversation, because right now it's wrong.
Yeah.
And it's they're just tossing it out without a second thought.
Yeah.
And I brought Jonathan Erber on today because he's not afraid to voice his opinion on Facebook, and I really value that. And that's what this podcast is all about. And then B, he has mentioned a couple things on Facebook about QAnon, so he left a few breadcrumbs that I'm hoping will lead to a good conversation here. We'll just jump in with the first question. What is QAnon? Can you
that's
give
a
us
good question.
A general overview?
Yeah, So QAnon is essentially a conspiracy theory about taking down another conspiracy theory.
Okay.
So it's like way in the weeds, right?
Right. Yeah.
We're multiple layers removed here. But I think conspiracy theory in general is. I'm glad you want to talk about that, because more of what we take in is theory than I think we even realize.
Agreed.
And you cannot deny that there are conspiracies that we're interacting with daily. So therefore, we are actually surrounded by conspiracy theories, you know.
Right.
And there's so much information coming at us through the internet that it's hard to decipher what's real and what's not. And basically, what you end up having to do is build a framework of how you interpret what's going on based on everything from your understanding of natural law to political players and their agendas.
Right.
And then from that, because try to assign motive, which is always a dangerous spot to go to.
It is.
But we do it subconsciously all the time, and I think it's good to bring it into the conscious area, and actually think about what are we assigning and why are we assigning these motives? Because everyone has motives, and I think that's an important thing to do. It's how you understand whether you should comply or not, or whatever. So anyway. So conspiracy and theory is all around us all the time.
Right.
And the thing with QAnon or mainstream media theories, and I think even the mainstream media is pitching us theories all the time.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And so people are like, "Oh, I don't do conspiracy theories." I'm like, "Well, do you listen to the news?"
Right.
It's theories, and the question should be: is this a theory or is it fact? And we need to be conscious about whether it's theory or fact. And everybody's theory, whether it's QAnon, some 9/11, JFK assassination, flat Earth, whatever. They're based on facts, and then from the facts we build theories, and we operate on those. So anyway, conspiracy theory has kind of become a little bit of a dirty word, but we're surrounded by theories all the time, and we kind of have to get over that fact and just realize that we're dealing with theories. So,
Right.
so yeah, when you sent me the text asking to have a conversation, I was driving and I didn't even realize this was going to be a podcast.
Okay, gotcha.
So I was like, yeah, let's talk. I love this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wouldn't consider myself a hardline QAnon.
Right.
But I've gotten to the point where it would take more faith for me to believe the interpretation of the facts that MSM is spitting at us than it would to believe the interpretation of the facts that QAnon is associated with.
Right.
And QAnon's kind of ambiguous. But anyway, so that is kind of a foundation of like conspiracy theory in general. So QAnon is a conspiracy theory about taking down. So yeah, QAnon is a theory about taking down another theory. And like the other theory is that there is a deep state which is being basically run by people behind the curtain, enforcing certain agendas. Most people take it to globalist government, associate it with a lot of the human trafficking that we're seeing. What a conspiracy theory we've all come to believe is that Epstein didn't kill himself. And it's obvious. You can't call it fact because the people who were there and saw it have not verified the fact that he killed himself. And yet some people have been there and are like, no, he totally killed himself. And all the outlying facts say he did not kill himself. So there's a theory that we've all come to see he did not kill himself. But if he didn't kill himself, who did and why? And that leads you to basically he was using his island, Epstein Island, Orgy Island, whatever you want to call it, to blackmail elites to be able to have power over them, to manipulate them. If you go down that road and then explore those facts, you get to the point where you just can't believe that it doesn't exist. There's just too much. There's too many facts there, and you could spend 2 hours explaining away every fact. And any one of them individually, you might be like, yeah, okay, I see how that could be coincidence. You can throw that out. But after 2 hours explaining away fact after fact after fact, you kind of have to ask yourself, hold on a second. There is so much circumstantial evidence that it would take a lot of faith to believe that all of this just happened, and it was total coincidence. And that's why I'm now on the fence of I believe QAnon is what QAnon says it is. I would not be surprised if it was not true. But anyway, let's back up a second before we go there. So you've got this deep state. There are a number of connections between CIA, Hollywood, politicians, both sides of the aisle. This is not just a right wing or left wing thing. It's all over the government. And it seems to have ties globally. But any if you talk to somebody who believes that this theory that there is a deep state, you're going to find all kinds of variations on how far they think it goes, what they think is tied to it, what isn't. But there's so much there that that I think there is a deep state, and there is, and I mean it should not be a difficult thing to realize. There are lobbyists who pay off politicians. Do you really think that somebody with an agenda wouldn't exchange sexual favors to blackmail? It's not that far. If you're going to pay off a politician to do something, which we all know happens, there's other ways of paying people off that are a little bit more manipulative, and we're naive if we think that people wouldn't use it. So it's what people do, how far it goes is open to interpretation. But then you got QAnon. It basically says Trump, military leaders are conspiring together to take down this deep state. And knowing what I know now from what Q has exposed, if you go back and you look at Trump's like campaign speeches,
Right,
you look at his policies, you look at he came into office and immediately just started going after pedophiles and all that. Uh, it it gets to the point where it's hard to believe that that was all total coincidence.
Right.
And it totally could be. Like,
Right.
it could be coincidence. But there's so much circumstantial evidence that you have to have a lot of faith
Right.
if you really start looking into it to believe that it's bogus or that it's some troll on 4chan or whatever.
Right.
And honestly, if it's a troll on 4chan, I want to meet the guy.
Yeah.
Because he's genius. Like,
he's been calling his shots, right? He's been calling his shots.
Yeah.
That's what I've heard from sources. I won't name them, but
Sure.
That he'll say something in like 2 weeks, a month, 4 weeks, 5 weeks later, it comes true.
Yeah, and not everything does. Like, a
Right.
lot of the naysayers will say, well, yeah, but he called this and this didn't happen. If you're in a war, you call stuff and it doesn't happen.
Right.
Like, that's
Right.
just, so that doesn't bother me. Like,
Yeah.
they could be totally right that it's just a troll on 4chan, and that's why he didn't call the shots right.
Right,
You know,
right.
but if you are deceived to the point to think that somebody in a battle like this would know everything that's going to happen and everything that they thought would actually happen,
Right.
like, that's a very unrealistic view of battle. You know, there's continual course corrections and
Right.
changes and
Right.
counters, and I mean, maybe they saw coronavirus coming. I think that that was a political stunt. Not that there's no virus,
Right.
but I think it's obviously heavily politicized, and I think they knew that it or something else was coming that they would take advantage of. You know, there's plenty of evidence that this was not a surprise. But anyway, I think there's continually in battle like redirects and course changes and stuff like that. So that doesn't dissuade me from believing that there's whoever's behind these posts, these Q drops, either knows something, is like a fortune teller. Like, I mean, totally could be. Totally could be. Like, this could be some kind of weird demonic thing, and he's like telling the future and trying to manipulate people, conservatives, into inaction by playing this whole thing. But I feel like QAnon has three options. Either it's a troll on 4chan, and you can take that as far as you want to go, or it's actually Trump and the military leaders, or it's the deep state doing some kind of psyop to manipulate conservatives in action, you know, and like the whole tagline, trust the plan, and that kind of a thing. So, which, honestly, if it's any one of these three, they're going to say trust the plan, right? So, like, you can't hold that against them. That's what they're going to say. Should you trust the plan? No. No. No matter which of those three it is, we have a duty to, you know, well, that gets into a whole nother discussion.
Well,
what our duties
let's
are.
jump into that, because I think that can maybe go along with the believability and what you might struggle with. Because I think that it's easy for people who want this to be true, because they're desperate for a hope in today's world. But as a Christian, we know, you know that there's a king already on the throne, and no matter whatever the outcome is in those three options, we've still won. Right. So like there's a certain like security we have that maybe other people who aren't in the faith don't. So I guess like kind of tying in like Christians and conspiracy theories, like how should we relate to QAnon? But then also what are some of the things that maybe Christians can look with hope into the
theory? Well, I mean, I think it would be okay, so I think Christians are often very quick to say like there's only one gospel and it's Jesus. Okay. Well, if my question to them is like, what the heck does that mean? You know? Because like, are you going to not go to work because well, there's only one person who provides for us, and it's God. Like, okay, God gave you a job, go do it. You know, so yes, there is absolutely one overarching gospel, and it's Jesus Christ. Like that's true. But that doesn't mean that therefore we don't take action. God isn't separate from human actions. You know, He's given us responsibilities to uphold, and he's given us governing leaders, and we're supposed to respect them and their roles. So yes, I think it's totally true, and I think a lot of people do. It's totally true that Christians should not view QAnon as a savior, an ultimate savior. But if I am in battle, there is a very real way where my shield or my weapon are my saviors in that moment, you know, and God has given those to me to use.
Right.
So it's Q may or may not be a weapon,
right,
or a shield,
right,
that we will put some hope in. Like, I don't think that's wrong. I think it's our ultimate hope is in Jesus Christ,
right.
But in the promises that we've been given there, but to separate ourselves from anything in politics, and to separate ourselves from anything in politics would be to have a really kind of Gnostic view of we all are part of this heavenly realm, and then what are we doing here, and why did God make us? I thought we were supposed to enjoy this and give us all, totally. There's all these material things that we've been given. So, absolutely. The biggest concern that I have with QAnon is people who view it as a savior to the point that they don't take action that they've been called to take.
Right.
And I think it's very encouraging to know that if it's true, there are people out there hustling against the evil powers that we see. Like, that's great. Is that going to keep me from talking to the sheriff and saying, like, can I become a sheriff's, deputy reserve?
Right.
Because, or enter into city council or county commissioner or whatever. Like, it's not going to keep me from taking those actions. I think that's the biggest danger, is if people actually trust the plan and it turns out to be a troll or the deep state, or honestly, even if it's Trump and military leaders taking this plan and they say trust the plan, to not still uphold our duties because someone else's is a neglect.
Yes.
So no matter what Q is, we have to still take personal responsibility for the things that God's given us to do.
Right.
And if some people use it wrong and sit back on their couch and go on 4chan and like be a troll themselves, well, that's not really helping anything.
Yeah.
That's not you taking responsibility. So that's my biggest concern with Q is people using him wrong. No matter which of the three it is, whether it's a troll, Trump, or the deep state.
Right.
And then the reason that the question is, well, then why are you even giving it the time of day? Well, that's where I think it naturally leads. You can ask me whatever question you want.
No, go for it.
So if that's the case, like, what do we actually do with it? Why is it worth giving the time of day? Q is attached to so much information about what's actually going on out there that you can drop a hashtag, WWG1 WGA, and people go, huh? And then they click it, and then like, what? And then they start seeing questions, and then they go look up the answers to the questions, and next thing you know, they are researching the stuff that they need to know is going on. So I feel like Q and the QAnons are a light on the deep state. And if you don't believe that the deep state exists, Q is pointless. But if the deep state does exist, Q is a big spotlight. And that's why I don't think it's run by the deep state. Like, the only reason the deep state would benefit from the QAnons in that culture is if people actually don't take action. But if you see the light that Q points on the deep state and say, holy cow, I need to do something about this,
Totally.
then it backfired on them. So if it's the deep state shining the light on themselves, well, there you go. It didn't work. If it's Trump and the military leaders shining the light on the deep state, great. Like, any way you look at it, it's a spotlight on the deep state saying, here's the corruption that's going on. And whether we know that or not, it's not going to change what the political leaders are doing.
Right.
But at the local level, we can take action and say, here's some things we need to address. There's human trafficking happening in your town. Do something about it.
Yeah.
You know,
Totally.
I mean, I always heard, honestly, until Q came along, I heard people talking about human trafficking, and I thought it was the type of thing where if you're in a bad part of town, or you're a prostitute, or you're, you know, a vulnerable person in a bad situation, or somehow you made a deal and they blackmailed you, and you had, like, I thought it was all this kind of stuff. And so it's like, live a good, upstanding Christian life in a good way and you'll be fine. No, that's not the case. Like, they are coming for our kids. They want them, and they'll do with them, depending how far you believe the theory goes, what they'll do with them, you know? And so realizing that that is as deep as it is much more motivating for me to take action on it.
Right.
800,000 kids missing a year is not a whole bunch of people getting blackmailed or doing drugs or putting themselves in a vulnerable position in an alley in Detroit. Like, that's not what this is. This is a much bigger problem.
Right.
Anyway, I think that was kind of the end of my point.
Okay, sweet.
Just that, like, the only problem with it is not doing anything.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
So.
I think that's a great point. Now, honestly, there's so much we could unpack there, but you know, I'll let them, the listeners unpack it.
Cool.
But maybe we can end with this. But one of my things I've struggled when thinking about with QAnon, or when I've had conversations with people, is President Trump. You know, because he seems to be a linchpin of sorts.
Yeah.
Or like he seems to be a hinge for this plan. And people have told me he's not the mastermind, but there, you know, like, because when he first was elected into office, we all kind of thought he's either a genius or he's mad.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that you could say that even now at the end of his election, you know, at the end of his 4 years. And I'm still not sure. You know, I'm still like, he'll do things. I'm like, this is awesome. But then recently, I'm like, this sucks. You know, like he needs to grow a pair almost. You know, just like, where has he been? But does President Trump offer any like doubts for QAnon, like for people who might see QAnon as a viable theory?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess, like, what's President Trump and all this, and your thoughts on him and the theory? Yeah.
I would like to assume that, and obviously everybody would, since he's our president.
Right.
I would like to assume that he has 100% honorable intentions in all this and is looking to take down the deep state. And there are some interesting connections there. Like, if you go back, he was close friends with JFK Jr.
Right.
JFK Jr. said he would avenge his father's death, even if it meant taking down the government.
Right.
And then he died. Interestingly enough, they never found his body.
Right.
There's awesome conspiracy theories there.
Yeah.
That are very entertaining. Like, honestly, very fun.
Yeah.
Absolutely has no bearing on my life. But they're very interesting. But anyway, so he goes missing, supposedly dead, while the story gets better, running against Hillary Clinton, of all people.
Right.
Like, you can make some awesome stories out of this, whether they're viable or not. So anyway, so he goes missing while running against Hillary, who we do happen to know is very corrupt.
Yes.
And then shortly after, Trump says, like, I'll pick that up and I'm going to see JFK Jr.'s wish through to avenge his father's death.
Interesting. Okay.
Even if it means taking down the government.
Right.
And now here we are, and he's saying he's taking down the government.
Right.
So, like, that's very interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Could he be a pawn? Totally. Is there anything that we can do about it? No.
Okay.
Like, my opinion is, either we have Trump in office, like, because all we can do is vote, right?
Right.
So, either we have Trump in office, and it turns out that he's a bad apple, or we have Biden in office, and it doesn't matter if he's even an apple.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
it's just the people behind the scenes running it, you know?
Right.
So, like, I think we all know that our option is either taking a gamble with Trump or getting a total just puppet.
Yeah.
You know?
Totally.
And so if Trump has washed up and he's corrupt and is with the deep state on this, then there's nothing we can do about it in
Right.
in DC anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And all the more reason, if it's that bad, to take action locally. You
Right.
know.
Right.
So, but yeah, like Trump is totally at the center of Q. He's
Right.
supposed to be Q. You
Right.
know,
Right.
like Q clearance is what Q is about.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Okay.
But then that goes back to, is Q a troll? Is he Trump?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it the deep state?
Yeah.
I don't think it's
Yeah.
the deep state. I mean, there are people who think that, and that's a viable theory. I think there's too many inconsistencies,
Mm-hmm.
and if you try to use Occam's razor on this, you're going farther into the weeds
Right.
to assume it's the deep state.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Right.
so I think it is either a troll
Mm-hmm.
or Trump.
Okay.
Like those are our two things. And then, if it is a troll, you can't miss the fact that Trump totally plays on Q.
Right.
Like,
Right.
did you see that video where he's at the rally and
Yes.
he's like, "Look at this baby!
Yeah,
You guys
yeah.
see this baby? It's the cutest baby!"
Yeah.
You know, he keeps going on and on. The baby's got a Q on his shirt. You
Yeah.
know, Easter egg stuff. There's a Q.
Right,
And one of the
right.
states' Easter eggs.
Yeah.
you
Did
know.
he like draw it in the air, like mimic?
Oh
like,
yeah, and
like,
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Like, it totally could be that, but he's been doing hand
Right.
gestures like that
Right.
for his whole life. So who knows? Uh, you've got somebody said, say tippy top in your next thing, next speech,
Right.
and he gets up on Easter standing next to a rabbit, which you're like, oh, it's the Easter bunny. No, that's Alice in Wonderland right there.
Right, right.
Round glasses and everything,
Yeah, yeah.
which is a huge like down the rabbit hole imagery
Right,
for
right.
that Q plays off of a lot. So he comes out after they're like, are you really Q? Say tippy top. He comes out next to the rabbit with the round glasses.
Right.
And in his speech says tippy top. So you're kind of like, it totally could be a troll.
Right. Right.
And if it is,
Totally.
Trump loves this troll.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so that's cool.
Yeah.
And so who knows? It could totally be that. But Trump knows about it.
Mm-hmm.
Trump plays off of it. So it all comes down to, like, either Trump is washed up and he's corrupt, and in which case all we can do is what we were going to do already,
Right.
except maybe with a little bit more knowledge about what's going on in the deep state,
Right. Right.
which should only push us to more action, in which case Q did good.
Yeah.
Or he is actually working with the military to bring stuff down. And in that case, like, if he is working with the military to bring this down, this could end very well. And then people are like, well, what about all these inconsistencies this year? What about the way he's just being a pushover?
Right.
Maybe he bought out, maybe they got to him. Or maybe it's just an election year.
Right.
Like, before all this coronavirus stuff started, I was
Right.
like, well, here comes 2020. It's election year. Anything from now to the election that Trump does, we can pretty much color with pretty significant question, because we've seen what he's done for the last 3 years,
Right.
and we're not gonna know anything about where he's at now until after the election.
Right.
So it could be that he's actually changed. Like, I've seen very different Trump in 2020
Yeah,
than previously.
yeah.
So it could be that he's changed, or it could be that he's trying to win an election so that he can get back to work.
Right. Right.
Right. So I don't know. I think where I'm at this moment is, it takes more complexity to believe that Q is not Trump or the military.
Right.
I would not be surprised to find out that it's not.
Right.
And if
right.
if it isn't, and if it is a troll, like, I want to be that guy.
Right. Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
Because that's hilarious.
Yeah. Man. Well. Awesome.
So that's where I'm at. If you
Okay.
don't know what in the world we're talking about, you should go look up Q, follow what's going on. It gets super dark.
Right. Yes.
But it's stuff that we need to be aware is going on, because it's happening in our country.
Right.
And it's stuff where we think it happens other places. We think, oh, that's, that was Nazi Germany. They were different. No, they were humans.
Yeah.
They were humans doing wicked stuff.
Yes.
And we've so bought what the mainstream media tells us, that this is a time of peace. And this is, if you actually look around, we're not living in a time of peace.
No.
And yet the mainstream media is still telling us that we've been given this glorious, peaceful existence.
Right.
And most of us are lulled to sleep because it is pretty comfortable. I go to my job, I go to the grocery store, I get food, I go home, I'm warm and dry. Like, we have everything that we need, you know? And so the worst situations we have are like health problems and relational problems, and those things happen. You know, so I think we are kind of lulled to sleep because most of us don't see it. And if we do, and then we speak up about it, we get silenced. Because it goes against the agenda. You know. So yeah, I think there is a ton of hope. I think it could get way worse. Either way, even if Q is legit, and they end up taking down the deep state, it doesn't solve the moral problems that we have. We have so much. We have so much work to do. A lot of work to do. Yeah. So yeah, we absolutely can't like see it as a savior, but it's a heck of a lot of fun.
It is. Yeah, totally.
And I like fun stuff.
Yeah.
If people came down to the shop and listened to us debating, like we love like. Conspiracy theories are just fun. You know?
I mean, they're good stories at the very least.
Yeah. You know? So we all, we make up our own conspiracies. And, you know, I argue that the world is a giant, like, turtle.
Yep.
We've got donut Earth theory. We've got flat Earth theory.
Okay.
Nobody argues for round Earth. Because that would just be too boring.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, totally. Yeah, that's
none of us.
One. Yeah.
I mean, it's all tongue in cheek, but it's just a good time, you know.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Man.
So who knows? But I think we just have to be faithful, and the thing that I think is super valuable about Q is that it has exposed so much, and so many people have woken up to what's going on, and that stuff needs to be known. So
yeah, totally. And actually, we just started a series on human trafficking. On the podcast, and we started.
Sweet.
Monday was our first episode, and we discussed Planned Parenthood.
Okay.
Because, you know, I mean, with all their baby body parts and how
my gosh.
David Dalian came out and exposed them in 2015. That's completely swept under the rug until recently.
Yep.
And so we're doing a short series on them, and then we're going to jump into Ghislaine Maxwell and everything else that's happening around there. Because, I mean, human trafficking is a fact. You know, like that's not a theory. Like that actually is happening. And so I think like there's, and you know, I mean, this kind of ties into conspiracy theories. Is like there are a lot of people that would have money tied up into this because you know it's almost $1 trillion corporation. You know, it's
huge.
Billions and billions of dollars wrapped up in this industry. And so I'm like, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. Like if I had a lot of money tied up into something, I'd be very protective of it. And I mean, I would never like obviously, but with them, like whoever they are, you know, they're probably making millions off of this thing. And so like, they would go to a certain extent to make money and also to protect themselves. You know, like that's not surprising. This goes back to Epstein, you know, in his island. I mean, there's a lot of creeps that were out there that are now in office right now, you know, on the Republican and Democrat side. Then you look into pornography and what that helps to encourage trafficking. And the billions of dollars wrapped up in that giant. So, I mean, there's a lot of money at stake. You know?
Oh, no, it's not going to go down without a fight.
And
totally. People who look at Trump or the military and they're like, come on, you're Trump and the military. Why don't you just do something about it? It's like, what?
And if they did do something about it, like, we wouldn't want that to happen. Like,
I
mean, like, if it's a military coup or a military takeover, like, who would want a military control? Like, it would be almost like the other end of the spectrum. Bad. Like,
well, and you have to be, like, because I believe the media is tied in with it.
Oh, yeah.
It has to be, if this is going to be taken down, it has to be so carefully done. Because you can't just go in with guns and pop them off and then they're gone and then like the story gets spun and it's worse than before. Like there's so much just political groundwork and education that has to happen so that you don't make yourself vulnerable to counterattacks and just the whole thing coming right back. You know. So it's. Yeah, our country's in a lot of mess.
Yeah, and let's wrap up with this one so I don't keep you for too long. But you talked about like just educating and learning about stuff like this. How would you encourage Christians or anybody to do that? Because right now, if you know, this podcast will drop next Wednesday.
Okay.
And I wouldn't be surprised if it got taken down on certain platforms.
Yeah.
If I
Yeah.
do like the tags and all
Yeah.
that, which I may not. I may just put it in the title and leave it. But you know, in mainstream media, big tech, they're doing everything they can to throw libels at this and like make you sound crazy, no matter how genuine of a conversation this may be.
Yeah.
And even if we're like saying but even if it doesn't work out, how would you encourage like Christians or anybody to take a stance when everyone else is saying that's crazy?
Yeah.
Because people don't want to be told they're crazy.
Yeah. Well, how to do research and how to take a stance is two separate things. I think in whether or not to take a stand, I think a lot of people are very quiet about it.
Right.
And I was quiet about it. I've got 8 households that benefit from Erber Auto financially from the work that they put in, employees and owners and that kind of thing. So if I get shot down, and there's more implications than just my wife and kids, as though my wife and kids weren't enough,
Right.
But I've kind of gotten to the point where this is a big enough battle. There's enough going on that do I want to have my business and then be under the thumb of the deep state?
Right.
Because I stayed quiet. Well, then what do I have then?
Right.
Or do I want to take a fighting chance and stick my neck out and actually get some information out there? And I basically come to where the risk of voicing my opinion is not larger than the consequence of not.
Right.
So we need to be saying stuff. And eventually people hear something enough that they actually go, wait a second, I knew Jonathan. He didn't seem, well, maybe people think I'm crazy. I don't know. I would like to assume people don't think I'm crazy.
Yeah.
But maybe a different friend that's more sane will say something and they'll be like, wait a second, that's the same thing Jonathan said.
Right.
So I think we just have to say stuff. We have to put information out there. We have to be willing to go to jail. That's right. With this whole mask mandate thing, it's like, seriously, it's a misdemeanor not to.
Right.
If this was all the flatten the curve stuff back in March and that kind of a thing, I'd wear a mask. Sure, absolutely. But we're just not, and I don't want to get into masks, but I don't believe that has anything to do anymore with actually protecting us from the virus.
Not at all.
We've all got it.
Yeah.
Like it's been around. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. So consequently, fine, give me the misdemeanor. I'll go to jail.
Right.
Like, let's do this.
Right.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
I hope some of my friends will show up so we can have a party.
Yeah. I'll be there. I'll meet you there. Yeah.
So I think we're at the spot where we can't be quiet. And if you haven't looked into this and don't know what is going on with the deep state, then this all sounds crazy.
Right.
Totally. It totally does. So you have to do the education. And I just want to say one other thing on that. I know a lot of people that I know are smart that I disagree with. I'm not a flat earther myself, but I know a lot of smart flat earthers. I'm also, for the record, not a turtle shell earther.
Right. No. I could tell, but that's good.
But I still know they're smart people.
Right.
And so I'm like, come on, let's talk. What are your presuppositions that have brought you down this road?
Yeah.
And that goes for all ends of the spectrum. I'll talk to whoever, because there's a lot of smart people that I disagree with.
Totally.
But I think we need to be willing to have those conversations and willing to actually say what we believe and not be shamed into silence by the MSM. So that's one thing.
Right.
As far as how to do research, I don't know. But one thing you can do is get rid of Google. Stop using Google. It is so censored. So I use DuckDuckGo.
Okay. I've heard of that.
That's my go-to search engine.
Okay.
I get a lot less filtered information there.
Okay.
You go search Lolita Express on Google. It will not autofill.
Oh, yeah.
They do not autofill things they don't want you to see, which only gives credence to the whole deep state theory.
Yep.
If you don't want people to know information, don't give them the information.
Right.
So anyway, get off of Google, use DuckDuckGo, find Instagram. A lot of the stuff is hard to find. Follow people on Instagram who who are talking about this stuff, and they dig up a lot of the stuff.
Right.
And then if you see it, then you can go fact check.
Right.
But it's hard to find it if you don't know what you're looking for.
Yes.
So yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Yeah. This is, I mean, like we'll wrap up there, and it might be a two-parter, but it might be good to just release it as one. So
sure.
There's context to it, but I think that this was an awesome conversation. Cool. I mean, like.
I had a lot of fun.
Yeah. No, I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
Good.
That's huge. Yeah. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah. Totally.